I'll just get started with a quick introduction. My name is Esme. I work for Athena Art Foundation, and today we are delighted to have the guest with us, Olivia Kemp. Olivia Kemp is a British artist and draftswoman, and she creates highly detailed pen and ink drawings. I've thought of lots of ways of introducing Olivia, but we're going to get straight into the discussion, mainly centred around her current exhibition, which is taking place at the moment in London at the James Freeman Gallery. It's called Labyrinthine, and it exhibits Olivia's exhibiting her works alongside the sculptor Beth Carter, and both of these artists are looking at how classical imagery can be used as ways of articulating contemporary themes. So Olivia, I see you've joined, so I will just invite Olivia to join us and we'll get stuck in straight away.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm good. To start with, where are you joining us from?
I'm just outside Oxford.
Oh, okay, great. I'm
I
actually
have my studio in the city.
cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a beautiful part. Yeah. Lots of great countryside. Yeah. So, to just get started, I wanted to kind of ask about where Labyrinthine kind of for you came about and how it started, because the kind of overarching theme is this joining of classical imagery, how classical imagery is used to interact with lots of different contemporary themes. Was that always the way that the exhibition was going to be conceived of, or is that something that and how you produced the works for it, or did it develop more organically?
Well, I work a lot with James, who represents my work in London, and his gallery is very much concerned with artists who reference art history.
Yeah.
So there's always been that kind of easy link anyway. But I started making the work for this show probably 2 years ago, right after I finished making work for my last exhibition, last solo exhibition, which was about the Prado collection. And I started, it was just sort of a build up of work that kind of began reflecting on lockdown and then ended reflecting on the death of my dad.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the middle, I was sort of making work, thinking about the sort of horrible things that were going on in the news with like the Sarah Everard case and things like that were sort of really kind of hitting home for me in like personal experiences. It was quite like dark subject matters kind of inadvertently, but the work just sort of came together at the same time that James was putting together the exhibition, and it's a theme that probably would always suit whatever I'm working on, quite luckily.
Yeah. From looking at some of your works previous to it as well, that would still be a theme, but I guess would you agree then that the kind of, when we say contemporary themes, I kind of almost is like it's really bringing in quite like difficult things that were happening at the time, that's very using the word contemporary in quite a kind of in a very immediate way as well.
And a personal lockdown, that's definitely a contemporary theme. Obviously things like grief, everyone has their own experiences with, but the way that you make work about it, or how open you are, or even like what you're wearing, I guess, kind of can put twists into the contemporary. It sort of brings a kind of humor. So there's those kind of references throughout.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So in terms of lockdown and not being able to go to galleries and not seeing this artwork that you have referenced, we'll get into some of the more specific artworks that you reference in a bit, but was that did that have an impact on, I'm sure it had an impact on everybody not being able to leave where we were locked down, but how do you think that had an impact? I
bought a lot of books. I bought a lot of big like coffee table art books, and I'd sort of be in the studio like, look at it, really enjoying that. And then I remember the National Gallery reopening and that being like, right, how can we get down? Let's book a slot. Let's get back in.
Yeah.
And that was like the first thing I wanted to see, I think. Even though there was some great shows like reopening, it was just that kind of like it's always been there. I've always been going there since I was like 16. And so
Yeah.
getting back in there was like, oh, okay, back into like, that felt like everything was okay again, you know, like that's them. We're all good.
For sure, yeah. I'm the same. Going back to the National Gallery, I don't think I actually saw any shows. I just wanted to be in there. Yeah, as a space. Yeah, definitely. So with yeah, did you feel that the lockdown, you were kind of more, this is a kind of out of interest, I guess, for working like practice as an artist, did you struggle with the productivity over that, or and then
it was so bad.
yeah, I mean, fair enough.
I decided prior to lockdown that I didn't want a studio in my house anymore, and that maybe in the future I could have one in the garden but not in the house. I decided that maybe like 6 months before lockdown, and I was like, cool, when we move house I'm going to find a new studio. And then lockdown happened, and so I ended up, rather than having it for a year in my house, I had it for about 3 years in my house, or 2.5 years.
Wow. Yeah.
I just really hated it so much.
Yeah, really hard. Yeah. And now are you working in a different studio then, a different space?
Yeah, I still haven't found like a permanent. I didn't really take on board how hard it was to find a space outside of London, and how tricky it is to hold on to one. I have a lovely space right now, but it's awesome. It's in somebody's back garden. It's like their ex-partner's painting studio. It's great.
Oh, wow.
But they're selling the house. So.
Yeah, so you're still kind of between spaces a bit. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I guess, can we talk about maybe a couple of pieces that in the exhibition that I visited it a couple of days ago, and I the one that stood out to me was someone's daughter.
I wanted to make a drawing that was referencing, I guess really specifically would be like Botticelli's Primavera, but also like I've been spending time in the Prado, and they had rehung, and it was a lot of nymphs, a lot of Rubens nymphs in all together. I haven't seen them quite en masse like that, and a lot of them are sort of being chased, and you know, they've got like a boob hanging out, and it's all very like coy. And I kind of wanted, and it's all in the landscape and very like Arcadian, and I kind of wanted to make something that was with real women, and maybe a little bit more confronting, and a little bit less kind of like, because it all looks very similar. They're all blonde, they're all like quite round, you know. Maybe something where the women are different, and it's sort of which, even though I was thinking about this when I was making it, I was thinking in a photograph, I don't think it would be as confronting as it would be in like a drawing or a painting, because we're just so we're used to it in advertising, seeing real women, and we're used to it like on the television and in all those, but just like in painting and drawing, it's still kind of like, oh, groundbreaking, which it isn't. But it also is. It's very odd.
Yeah, and with that, I think what's interesting as well is that if I see women in, or anybody, any sitter in a photograph who is posed, it seems much more kind of, I don't even notice necessarily that they're posed. Whereas I think in a painting or a drawing, and what struck me about your works is that each sitter has their own kind of space and their own pose, and that I think often it's kind of, that is confronting in itself. I think in some way we're not so used to seeing drawings that necessarily, maybe we are, but not so directly. I'm not sure. Is that something that you think about when I'm sure it is, that you're thinking about the poses very
I wasn't going to stitch them all like they were sort of best mates, you know, like just it just didn't feel, they don't know each other, and it didn't feel quite right. And I felt like they were each I mean they'd all sent me their images, and I felt like they'd all sort of volunteered to be in the image, and I'd asked for women who don't typify like ideas of feminine beauty, like maybe even on very simple levels, like maybe you're very tall, you know, maybe you know, you weightlift, like whatever it is, like just and so I felt like they sent me these images being like, this is me. They don't know the other people, and I sort of felt like perhaps it was quite good to give them their own space and their own sort of setting. And it kind of was linked quite nicely with the Primavera, because I was reading about it and I was thinking, well, the Primavera is like all these different sort of stories from different literature put into one painting to be educational, and not actually all from one story or one, it's not telling a story, it's telling several different bits of mythology all in one image. which kind of works quite nicely with what I was trying to do.
So did you and I guess an important part of the Primavera, the reason that it comes together is the landscape around them, like the setting that they're in.
Well, I sort of put everyone in one at a time and built up a little bit of a space around them, and then put in the next person and the next person, and started to build it so that I knew everyone would have that kind of almost like sort of like a halo of flowers or like a tree or something that sort of separates them a little bit in space from the next person. But and that was quite easy, I guess. It wasn't really like a plan that I set out.
Yeah, because you do it fairly organically in that sense that you haven't mapped out beforehand the intricate detail of it, right?
Yeah, and I had like 2 or 3 people that I didn't fit in the end, that I had every intention of including, and I didn't.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. just
because I guess you have the paper, and that's what you're working on, right? So
yeah, I didn't make a choice and set it down until really late in the day. And that was like, I spent about an hour looking at it and being like, but I want to include this other lady, and like, but it's not going to work, and there isn't time, and like all these other constraints. So you're like, it's just that's a whole other drawing. That's another day, you know.
Yeah, and when you're doing those kind of halos around them of that's mainly like flowers and leaves and things like that, do you have, because I'm thinking about the Primavera and a lot of kind of Italian Renaissance art, that it's often symbolism going on with it. And is that an element of it? How do you decide what kind of flowers or foliage you're putting?
I mean, I kind of tried to use mostly sort of British garden flowers, just because, you know, it's a bit different to something really Italianate, and it's got like, you've got oaks and you've got like foxgloves, and it kind of just sort of sets it a bit differently. But I slightly kind of flattened it a bit like the Primavera. It sort of feels like quite like almost like a sort of theatre backdrop. So trying to sort of create that slight flatness, I guess, but without the darkness. Yeah, I couldn't tell whether it was originally that dark or whether that was like, you know, just a time thing.
Working with color, how is working in monochrome, in black and white like that, is that really, can you see yourself working in color, or are you like?
Well, I don't ever say never, because I think you go through so many sort of phases, don't you, as an artist. So I'm like, well, you know, maybe 10 years down the line, I'm going to be really into that idea. I think it's really silly to be like, well, I'll never do this or I'll never do that. But it's definitely not something I'm interested in a minute. And when I envisage some of them in colour, they almost seem a bit like they sort of tip into the twee, just with sort of the amount of like, the way the landscapes are constructed and the amount of flowers and like food. And I don't know how I would colour them that would make them not, and I don't really have an interest in trying either.
Yeah, no,
it's like a problem I'm not that bothered about solving. Black and white takes out time of day, it takes out something of place and something of like weather or moment. It takes not always, but it takes a little bit of that away, which sort of gives people, I think, a bit more of an into the picture itself. It's sort of not saying like, this is Florence 2 weeks ago, you know. It's sort of there's something slightly less in the moment about it.
And time of day as well. I think that would be so hard to do with all of that detail, trying to get a shadow, I imagine.
All of mine have a shadow on the same side, and we just that's about as technical as it's getting.
Yeah, exactly. So I wonder if I could ask a bit about the self-portrait that's in the Labyrinthine exhibition, because and about some possible like kind of pre-modern art historical like influences with that. Because you're wearing a t-shirt in it, which is, what does it say on it? It's
my dad's Looney Tunes t-shirt, which I sort of insisted I got all his Looney Tunes t-shirts because I remembered him wearing them when I was young. And it says "Born to be Wild," and it's got
that's it.
The Tasmanian Devil and Wile E. Coyote on motorbikes.
Oh, that's so so it's like, it's a proper like, what would it be, 80s 90s kind of t-shirt?
It's printed like 1991. I think it's got a little bit
and because that for me is like, immediately just looking at it as a viewer, obviously it's got that like really sentimental value for you as a viewer as well. It's just straight away like places it in like modern times, like the last few decades kind of thing. And I guess yeah, but then there are also like art historical references in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, one thing about that.
I feel like the t-shirt was like so important because ultimately, like the only way I could really describe that portrait would be like a grief portrait, because I really
Mm,
didn't know what else to draw, and I really was like in that kind
yeah,
of introspective sort of point.
yeah,
And that a lot of people said, oh, that doesn't really look like you, and I'm like, it really does. Like when I'm in that spot and when I'm, you know, when I'm not making an
that's
effort with myself and I'm
amazing.
not eating properly and all of those things, that's what I look like.
Yeah,
And I think the
wow.
t-shirt kind of just brought a little bit of like fun, like it, because it's sort of
Yeah,
when you're reflecting, like all the flowers were like his funeral flowers, and all the fabrics in the background are from his house and like his clothes and things I
amazing.
have. So
Yeah,
I just thought, you know what, like the t-shirt just brings a little bit of fun because he was a fun person, and I don't want to make a drawing that's just like, here's my heart on the table.
yeah, yeah. And
It has
also,
something of
yeah,
like his wit, I guess, and his sense of humor about it.
yeah, and that what a wonderful way with those t-shirts as well. That was you saying like, I want that, I want that, those memories of fun in
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's amazing. See, it's so like wonderful to know that, because looking at it, it just becomes a whole other portrait. Like it's
Mm.
actually like when you first, I guess that's the thing about self-portraits, isn't it? That it's like if you're drawing yourself, that's it's got all of that like projection of your own memories, your own what you're going through at the time that you're doing it. And
Yeah.
then yeah, and it's captured in that. And you said that there was like the ledge in front of it
Oh
when,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Well, I wanted
and
to have a little like sort of Titian Rembrandt ledge moment.
that's amazing. Yeah, and
But
it's like
I wasn't gonna go like the full, you know,
no, yeah, they do that. Yeah, but
get a
no,
big sleeve.
that's amazing as well with the kind of, because those portraits where they have the ledges on, it's so like, I don't know, there's like a kind of formality to it, I guess, in a way.
Mm.
Or not always in necessarily like paintings, like Titian's is the blue man one that I'm thinking
Yeah.
of, like he's got like this big blue sleeve, like it's not, I don't know, there's just like a kind of distance, I guess, from having that ledge, but then it's also like perching out to you a
Yeah.
bit,
Whereas
like
I've
to
got
the
the ledge like
viewer.
here, as if I'm sort of peering over the ledge.
Yeah.
I've never committed fully to saying I do portraits, or like I'll call it a
Mm.
portrait, but the people I'm drawing get a caveat being like, it probably won't look like you, and it's in pen, so if I like it, I'm keeping it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm not there to like create something that's so of you, that says so much about you. Like that's not really the purpose of these drawings.
Yeah.
Particularly in the big pieces where I almost feel like
Yeah.
people are being very kind and they're lending me their image and a little bit of their story, but it's
Yeah.
not a work that's about them. You know, they're not there and they didn't contribute anything other than the photograph and a little snippet perhaps. And I
Yeah.
would, it would be unfair to them to be like, here is you, you know. I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
them very
totally.
well, you know.
Yeah, and then so do you ask them to pose in certain ways, or are
I just
they
got everyone to send me pictures
okay?
of their head.
Oh, okay. So then you'll do the
Yeah,
body separately as well.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the piece "Wish We Were Dreaming," which is of friends of
Yeah.
mine, which I did during lockdown. So that was people whose lives I was seeing online. So it's kind of like an odd selection of friends from of people I know very well, people I haven't seen since school, but they were all people I
Yeah.
was seeing a lot online. And
Amazing.
they just sent me their faces, but "Wish We Were Dreaming," I got them to send the other piece, someone's daughter, I got them to send me like one sort of body shot.
Okay.
Just because they were, I wanted to know, like, you know, do you have tattoos, and like, you know, are
Yeah.
you plus size or whatever it was, because I had some amazing people who have amazing things about their bodies that you'd want to include, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I guess also with someone's daughter, it being about ideals of women, of what women should look like, or all of that, and kind of breaking that down, it would be, yeah, I think not having the bodies being a diverse range of bodies, that would be kind of, I guess, defeat the point in a way, because like
Yeah,
you say with the, yeah, Rubens nymphs, and they're always in a certain body, I mean, depending on the time in history, but it's always the ideal of
they're
the woman's
pretty much always
body.
blonde and white and like slightly plump.
Yeah, just going back to Wish We Were Dreaming, you mentioned like there's a Manet link, I think.
There's one who has the pose of the woman who's naked in
Yeah,
Deja News,
with
and
the hand.
yeah, So
Yeah.
he's got that sort of almost direct. I was
That's
really
great.
lucky because I found it's a friend of mine, and he's a model, and I found a picture online of a naked man doing the déjeuner sur l'herbe woman
That's
pose. So that's why he's in like skin tight clothing, because I
so
was
you can
really
see
sort of
it.
literally using that body to
Yeah.
use the same pose. But that was just like a lucky fluke because I looked it up and was like déjeuner sur l'herbe man, and
Yeah,
somehow
because I
it
love
exists.
that. Yeah, I love that it's a man who's posing like that, because the woman in Déjeuner sur l'herbe is kind of ridiculous when you look at it. That the woman is completely naked and
Mm-hmm.
the men are
Depicted.
fully clothed. It's just bizarre. But you know, I guess you're just in an art gallery, so it's like, oh yes, of
Yeah,
course.
this is
Um,
fine. This is normal. This makes total
yeah,
sense.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I guess also before, so we've got a few minutes left, and it would be really cool to hear about, like, I guess how you're feeling at the end of this exhibition. Like, are you feeling like kind of this is something that you like? What have you learned from this exhibition and from how it's evolved, and
I
maybe
feel
where
like
you
I
want
kind
to
of like
go?
exorcised like a few sort of things that I kind of wanted to try. And I think
Yeah.
I've sort of figured out a little bit like going forward how I want to use figures in my work and how I want to kind of push that in different ways, like referencing other artists and people I've been interested in using for a while. Yeah, so it's interesting because I feel like with like someone's daughter, some of the figures are quite, and it felt right for the piece, and I would sort of argue that it's still right for the piece, that they're quite sort of confronting and they're looking out
Yeah.
at you. But I also want to play with like the idea of the figures becoming part of the like the staffage, and like play with them, like, you know, them being in quite sort of patterned clothing and sort of falling in and out of the
Wow.
scene a little bit more as well.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something that's not, you know, as important, that they have a, you know, a real sort of sense of presence. I think that would be quite interesting to play with.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I guess sometimes, like, when they're, tell me if I'm wrong here, but like when they're confronting us like that really directly, that obviously it makes viewers think about, particularly with the context of like we're thinking about femininity and ideals of the feminine, being confronting has an impact for sure, but then also like being hidden and being kind of absorbed into this background also would have it would have a different impact, but it would still possibly raise some of the same questions, or
Yeah,
in slightly different ways, about like how women in art particularly, I guess, are often portrayed. They seem to just, there's the Daphne, then one of my favorites is like Daphne turning into a tree, which is
yeah.
like various ones, but that one is just like a kind of classic. The woman turns into a tree and then she's just there
She's
being
just
a
a tree
tree.
now.
She's just a
That's fine.
tree. It's like, great, lucky
What a
her.
wonderful story.
Yeah, yeah. But that's what I always think of when thinking about like nature kind of taking over, or like landscape taking over. Like women's bodies are so often seen in art like that, and I guess, yeah, Daphne is the one that always comes to mind. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's it'll be so cool to see. I mean, you share so much on your Instagram, right, of like the process as well. So it'll be
yeah.
really interesting to see how that kind of develops from someone's daughter onwards. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
It's like pulling things from like the show I had 2 years ago that works, and then things that I've found in the last show that work, and then trying to sort of mesh
yeah,
them into new work, I
yeah,
guess.
definitely. And I guess, yeah, now is there must be a sense of kind of like, okay, like you've closed some of the chapters of this exhibition, which I'm sure happens every time you finish a residency or an exhibition, but yeah, I guess now you kind of start new
Yeah.
ideas, new
I mean,
routes.
those
Yeah,
works take so much out of you because you're making them in lockdown, you're making them without seeing your
yeah,
friends and them coming and giving feedback or being able to discuss them with anyone. And you're also making them about lockdown and
yeah,
about how you're feeling and things that are happening and that you're not being able to share like so much with friends and family because of things that happen, you know, the way the world is.
yeah,
And it's just like, so suddenly the work is done, it's out there, and it's like, okay, you know,
yeah,
time
yeah,
to
yeah.
kind of
Okay.
reflect on other things, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It's been so good, and thank you for coming on and joining us. Uh,
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll be looking out at what you're doing and looking forward to seeing everything that you're going to be producing and creating. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
great. Okay, well, take care then. Thank you everyone for joining. Okay, bye. Bye. Bye.